All right, well, I'm going to get started. It's just shortly after 7:30, and I want to be respectful for all of you that have joined on time. There have been quite a few that have signed up, and I know several people tend to listen to this after they don't participate live, so I'm just going to get started. So again, welcome to all that who have joined this recording. We are going to be recording this episode. A couple of things before we get started. On that note, it is being video recorded. If you don't want to be on video, please make sure that you tap on your Zoom not to activate the video. My video is activated on purpose. If you have a question for me, please feel free to send it through chat, or you can take yourself on and off mute. I have everybody off mute except for one person because I was hearing a lot of feedback. So just make sure that you are, if there's a lot of feedback, I'll put us on universal mute, but hopefully try to keep this as live, and feel free to interrupt, ask questions as we go. What we're going to cover for about an hour, probably less, I'm going to go through like who I am as a coach, my mission, my credentials. We're going to go over the topic, which seemed to be a really big topic. I got lots of emails, people I haven't heard from in a long time, questions. So it seems to be quite a topical topic for everyone, but the topic is signs of the toxic environment, and I'm going to be sharing 8 strategies to try to survive it and rise above it. Again, it seemed to hit a lot of hit a nerve. At the end, as always, I'll be opening up for Q&A. You can ask any of your burning questions that relate to the topic or not related to the topic. It's completely open. And also I'll share again at the end, but just to share here for those that haven't been connected to me, for anyone who listens to a call, you can get a free half-hour discovery call with me. They're usually worth $250, but you can get a free call with me. Go to info@loamlife.com. That's info, INFO, @loamlife.com. I only connect a few a month now, but you can grab your free call, and we can talk about anything that you would like to talk about. So before I move on, are there any questions? We're starting to get more people. All right, then I'm going to keep going. So who am I? I'm going to start with my point of difference. I'm going to share a couple things with you throughout this process that I'll be calling out. One of them is a key term called point of difference. For those of you that are working on your career at the beginning, in the middle, or you're in upper management, it's very important to know what your point of difference is, meaning how are you different from other coworkers? If you're interviewing, how you're different from people that could be interviewing. And I work a lot with my clients to really hone what that point of difference is. It's actually one of my most favorite thing to do with my clients, because usually people don't think that unique. When we start going through the resume, talking about the point of difference, it really comes out. So again, your point of difference is what's unique to your competitive set. So as for me, as a coach, I am a chief marketing officer at a boutique agency in Gramercy in New York. I have been doing marketing for 18 years. It's one of the reasons why I like to share these terms along the way. You almost get like a little marketing MBA on some of these calls to learn some terms. But what really drives my difference from other coaches is that I'm NYU and ICF recognized trained international career transformation coach and strategist. I call myself a career strategist, and that's what I'm certified in. I have worked with clients in the US and all over the world. It's been a truly wonderful trajectory that I have been on since I started my business in 2013. One of the clear differences I have is that I'm not only educated, but I have a real world perspective. And I also bring studies that I have been exposed to in my career and in my training, from neuroscience to behavioral science, to help people take power over their career. And you'll hear me mention that a couple times. I'm going to be launching some new programs, one of them called Power of Your Career. I also have Power of Your Business, and also Power Over Your Life, which there's a lot, I feel, a blur between our personal and professional lives. And I really work to help people not only succeed in their career, but sometimes what we're replicating in one part of our lives is also replicated in the other. So I definitely see that a career is not just by itself, it's part of your life. We spend a third of our lives at our job, and probably more because of the blur of the personal and professional. And I also see that our life impacts our career, because we need to make decisions not just from a work standpoint, but how it impacts our career. I've worked with hundreds of clients, and as I mentioned, I just have worked with people from Germany, Hong Kong, Australia. A lot of they will be listening to this recording later, and then sending me questions. Thank you so much. And so I work with, my commitment is to executives as well as entrepreneurs and young professionals, and really help them navigate and find, helping them strategize with tips and tools and a 5-step process, proprietary process that I have created based on working, is to hopefully make work more rewarding and always more profitable, and to the next step. I just had something pop up that said my internet is unsustainable. Is everyone, can someone let me know if you can still hear me and I'm not breaking up?
Victoria, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah, you are breaking up a little bit.
A little bit. Okay, let me just take a second and maybe close a couple of things that might help us before we get too deep in this. And thank you, June, for letting me know that. And I will close one more thing I did not realize was open. And hopefully that will help. If for some reason we have a little bit of trouble with the internet, things in New York are a little bit off, please just kind of jump back in. I can definitely repeat things, but hopefully my closing some of this out will definitely help the situation. So where I'm going to go next is really the content, as I mentioned for the calls, 8 smart strategies for thriving or rising above a toxic workplace. And I'm going to start with a key question. I always start with key questions. I find that people jump to answers a lot, and it's important to start like with a couple of key questions and probably adopting that most of our lives, asking questions versus us just jumping in with answers. But like one of the key things about this is like I'm telling you strategies for thriving in a toxic workplace, but how do you recognize a toxic environment? And some of you may have already seen this in my recent blog. It is available on my .com, loamlife.com. So you can go there and actually read the entire article itself. But I want to start with what those things, how do you recognize it? So in our lives, in our jobs, and let's be honest, like some jobs can just sap the life out of you, and they could be not mind-numbing. There might be a lot of gossip, round-the-clock work emails, as I mentioned, the blur professional, and where you're always on or always expected to be on. And if on top of that, which could be worse, you could be micromanaged by a boss. There's verbally abusive supervisors who think they're being helpful. I actually just worked with someone today who's like, my boss thinks they're being really helpful, but the feedback is just not given to me in a way that I can truly understand it. And it was causing her a lot more stress than I think the supervisor had really meant. And also sometimes you're just faced with backstabbing coworkers. And since, as I mentioned, that we spent a third of our days at work, it can make you just like not want to get up every day. And if you're starting experiencing that, like it's becoming a drag to get up, do I want to come in? You're calling in sick. You might just want to hide under the covers or just flat out quit. You're probably in a toxic environment and you're not alone. There was a recent study that showed that 1 in 5 report a hostile or threatening social environment at work. And women and men are dropping out of work in record numbers, especially millennials who are not finding the stability that a lot, like I'm a Gen X and other generations found in their career. It's just causing burnout and they want out. I've been there myself. I tend to share a lot of my own stories to kind of give perspective and to show that, hey, no matter where you've come in your career, you're going to eventually make it where you want to go. You just got to have that belief. And I really have had that experience. There is someone who I'm getting some feedback with, so I'm going to put everyone on mute. And if you want to ask a question, again, feel free to go in the chat room or just take yourself off mute. But I've just done that to try to not get the feedback here. So I've personally been there myself. It's actually one of the reasons why I became a career coach, as I really want to change corporate America. I actually do love corporate America and I love my coaching. It's sometimes these pockets like an up and down roller coaster in your journey of your career, where you're happy one moment, you're not happy another. It could be a shift change, it a boss change, but I really want to help people find the work that they love, either in their current environment or finding something else. So my personal story is about a few years ago, and it's very pivotal. I started a job. I thought it was going to be great. I was really on my uprise in my career. I was extremely successful, and I wanted a challenge. And you always have to be they say, be careful what you wish for. And part of me really wishes I had been a little more careful, which is something I work on my clients, making sure that you assess the job before you move there to make sure it's the right one for you. But it seemed like a good move at the time, and it really still was. It was a new position at a top agency where I had opportunity to work with like the best in the industry. What happened though when I got there is I realized, one, I probably took a bigger step than I thought when I got there. So that kind of threw me off a little bit. I wasn't in my normal zone. I'd been at some place 4 or 5 years, and any place you start new can kind of throw you off. But also I had a boss, and no matter what I did for that boss, if I said it was white, he would say it was black. If I changed it to black, he would insist it was gray. Like, he micromanaged me, and it wasn't just me. He belittled everyone, my coworkers, even clients. And it was all under the guise, he would say, of like making us, to make us. I was all of you. I actually got put on probation. So being also my health issues soared. I don't know if some of you can get this, but I haven't had one in years, which is great. But like, you get a twitch in the eye, I was getting headaches, and my blood pressure started to rise, which wasn't great. And the worst part about it in this time, which is really what drove me into coaching and actually seeking out my own coach at the time, was I thought I was the problem. I had no idea that this guy was not like a really good boss. I was like, well, if he thinks that I'm not doing well, then I must be the problem. So I turned myself inside out. And this is a really important part of this, and what you really need to be looking at. And I'll go through some strategies. But in any environment, even if the environment circumstantial around you is toxic, you need to look at yourself and what you need to own of it. And what I needed to own, kind of interestingly in all of it, was I was being really hard on myself and giving so much power and so much energy away to this man. And what I really need to realize was that my workplace was just toxic. And I just don't want that to happen to any of you. You might probably already sometimes in some toxic work environments. I mean, no work environment is completely great all the time, but I want you to know that you're not the crazy one, and help you create kind of those action steps that you can take, that I've learned going through this and working with my coaching. So let's go into like the 7 signs of a toxic workplace, and I'm going to do these high level because I mentioned that it's on my website, the full blog. But toxic workplaces, this is really important for my leaders in the on this call, or they're listening to this call, because it can drive talented people out, including yourself. I've looked back at some jobs and the way that I was treated, and I'm like, if I had stayed, I was running millions of dollars of pieces of business, and leaving puts those pieces of business in jeopardy. In fact, I'll share a story of one boss that I worked with that drove all of us out, and they ended up losing the piece of business. And it's important, because one of my biggest regrets is actually not speaking up in that moment to try to shift that environment. But some of the signs that you're in a toxic environment, and I've touched a little bit on, is like when you constantly want to call in sick, or you're noticing everyone is around you. I actually am one of those, like, I realize I have a way too strong work ethic, which I've been working on, and hopefully none of my bosses are listening. My current ones are listening to this, but I've been really kind of pulling back and making sure I'm taking care of myself, because you can't give if you're not taking care of yourself. But if you're constantly wanting to call in sick, or you are sick, and even if you're not, yes, okay, you definitely can be taking a mental health day every once in a while, but you're noticing you are and your colleagues are, there's probably like something wrong, because if it's hard to motivate yourself to go in, it might be time to rethink things. If you feel stuck, that your career is not moving forward, there's little or no training, and that's been happening a lot at companies, where they're just, one of the first things they're cutting is training. It's actually starting to take a roundabout, which is really important. They usually need a hand raiser at the company to move it forward. But if there's no training, or you're never getting any recognition on a job well done, there's no opportunities for advancement, like you might be wanting to look for something else, because there are companies that actually will give you training. They will recognize a job well done, and they will provide opportunities for advancement. And those are a couple of things that you might want to be thinking about if you're in a current job, to see what they might be able to do to address those things, and or definitely be looking at that when you're assessing if you're going to be leaving a role. You're not encouraged to take risks. In today's work environment, it changes so rapidly. The pace of transformation, which used to be in increments of like years, and some of it like 50 years when we're talking about steam engines and all that, which is way old, and I was not around with the steam engines. But anyway, for those that were like, when it used to be in increments of like 50 years and down, it's now to 6 months. There is no way everyone's going to know everything. And it's really important to have teams that you can work with, you can rely on, a boss that sees value in you, because you never know, and that you rely on others around you, because you just never know where an idea is going to come from. So there's no sign of innovation. There's no interest in new ideas. It might be also a time that your environment's toxic. It may not be right away. Some people get comfortable, but if your environment cannot grow and innovate, eventually someone's going to come in and disrupt it, and everyone's job is going to be at jeopardy. So you can be that person to try to get them to innovate and take risks. That's great, but that is a sign to be looking at if that's an environment that you're in that you might be wanting to think about on that not being a really great environment for the long term. You're expected to be calling 24/7. Look, like there's texts at 11 p.m., urgent emails. I was actually just talking to another client the other day. She just got a job, which is great, as an executive recruiter, and got a great raise, all these different things. And she worked it out with her boss before she took the role, and said, he's like, look, I'm on a lot 24/7. She's like, well, what does that mean? And that's a really important distinction. We'll talk a little bit about assessing what does it mean by your being on call 24/7. Some of us think that means we have to be available. This guy just said to her, look, like, I just want you to you don't have to answer that point, but answer as soon as you can, and just say that you'll deal with it on Monday. So they weren't expecting her to work over the weekend, but if she hadn't assessed that, she might have actually fallen into that trap, and who isn't going to take advantage of that? So, just really watch. Are you expected to be on 24/7? Did you create those boundaries? Is it interrupting your time with your kids, your love life? Do you even have a love life? Because you're just always focused at work. The next area to look at for a toxic environment is everything political and or personal. You're forced to compete with your colleagues, and competition can be healthy to a certain extent, but if you're always competing, they're making it personal against you or someone else, that can be really tiring, and also not a hospitable environment. It can be unkind, it can be downright scrupulous, and it can just create more toxicity in an environment that probably is already not really a great one to begin with. And one area that can really also cause a toxic environment is you don't know what your boss wants. And look, some of us are leaders on this call, we're managers. It's hard sometimes to know how to tell someone what you need. You get trained in it, but it can still be a difficult conversation to have. So if you don't know what your boss wants, instructions are vague, or worse, are always changing. It could be that, yes, your boss is just a jerk. And I do know clients that have had bosses that just want to make things to be difficult. I've personally had them. But some bosses just need you to ask them, be very clear, and we'll go over that, one of the ways to deal with one of those strategies on how to deal with a boss who just can't tell you what they want, and how you can drive that conversation and take back the power. Because that's what it's all about in this toxic environment, and any toxic environment is really owning that power, taking back your power, and not putting any more energy into it as much as possible. The last thing that it can be a sign of a toxic environment is really if you and your coworkers aren't encouraged to bond. On the flip side, if you're encouraged always to be with your coworkers, that could also be a toxic environment. There are a lot of environments where they have on-site daycare, and they have all these different things that encourage you to be there all the time. That goes back to being if you're expected to be on call 24/7 and people are leaving, crying, they have no lives, you have no life, that is a sign of toxic environment. But on this other side of it, if your coworkers aren't encouraged to bond, there's no breaks, there's no how are yous, it's all about just getting the job done. It's cold and friendly. what they might be trying to do is a divide and conquer strategy, and people just won't stay for that, and you shouldn't either. Really be looking at, like, if you're not encouraged to bond, that's definitely a sign that there could be a problem. So are there any questions on some of the toxic environments, or are there any toxic environments that someone was thinking about that I didn't mention that they'd like to share on the call? All right. So hopefully that covered a lot of them. If you do have any toxic environments, you can definitely, okay. Did get a comment. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm breaking up. Thank you for letting me know. And and then I did get the one comment like, toxic workplace, been there, done that, got the t-shirt and the bruises to show for it. Okay, definitely. So let's move on to getting some. That's awesome. We all have them, don't we? Like, it's amazing. We will move on to, like, giving you some tools and tips to dealing with the toxic environment. So just as I shared a key question of what do you need to look at for toxic environment, how do you recognize it? One of the key questions here is, what role do you play in it, and what can you do about it? And I asked two questions there because what you can do about it is easy. Like, I'm going to give you a whole list of that. But, like, what role do you play in it is important for you to really think about, especially if you're a manager or a leader. Because in one case, as I mentioned, I was a leader. I had a full team. It was extremely toxic, and I didn't deal with it. And it's actually one of the regrets that I have. Because I'm just going to promise you, no matter what the environment, you're playing a role, whether it's passive, which maybe that's the right way to be. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be passive and you have to be the one that speaks up, but you really do need to see what role you're playing in it, because it might be perpetuating it and actually could be addressed. Or you're actively participating in it. There is sometimes can be that gang mentality or a victim mentality. And I talk a lot about this with my clients, like when they get hit with something that feels like something's off or they're being ganged up on. One of my other clients today had mentioned that she really feels that, like, she's being ganged up on. And as we broke it down, it really did seem like it was, and she needed to take it to HR. But another client had to really assess that, oh yeah, actually I am being apathetic, or I'm actually encouraging some of this because it's actually an interesting, unknown but interesting way to bond. So it's really important that you think about, what role you're playing and what you want to do about it. So some of the strategies are 8 smart strategies for thriving and rising above a toxic workplace. First of all, yeah, I just mentioned that you should really think about whether you're playing a role in it. But honestly, sometimes these toxic environments are just bigger. There are 3 entities when it comes to a corporation. One is the actual corporation, there's your boss, and there's you. And yes, the only person you can really deal with is you, and I'm going to give you some strategies here. But sometimes that boss and that corporation are just so big and so unwieldy, it's just circumstances. And I don't want you to be hopeless with that, because there are definitely things that I'm going to tell you here that you can do about it to take care of yourself. But sometimes you can try to fix the situation, but you can't. So some of these suggestions are really just about focusing on yourself, watching your energy, watching where you're giving your power away while you escape, while you hatch your escape plan. Because toxic environment, they rarely change. Though shout out to Amy. I have this one client who has been at this job for decades, and she outlasted the entire regime. They changed it, and she just got promoted into the role that she wanted. That sometimes happens. And that is actually something I hadn't mentioned in the list that I'm about to give you. Sometimes you need to watch the signs. Another client that I just spoke to today is in a toxic environment, and her boss was written up. She got written up, and I'm like, well, you never know. That boss could actually be out of there. So it's important to kind of look at the whole situation. But either way, whether you're going to stay there because you want to and you're going to outlast the regime, or you're thinking about your escape plan, you just want to make it more tolerable, here's my advice on how to survive and thrive and rise above a toxic environment. One is get your anthropology on. Like, that means you need to take a deep breath, go in, and pretend you're an anthropologist. And this is good also just for yourself. Like, how is this environment working? How is my boss being toxic? The point is, you really need to get distance in it. And it can really help. As I mentioned, I was talking to a client today. She's definitely in a toxic work environment. And her framing of it, which was making it even more distressful for her, was like, they're out to get me, and he hates me. And as we started to break it down, what we realized is that, like, the current environment she's working in, her manager isn't making his numbers. He sees this woman as an opportunity, and he has even said so when she really started to tell me what he was saying, as someone who could help them make their numbers. So it wasn't so much like he was putting her in a place and giving her feedback that she needed to perform, or because she was performing necessarily bad or poorly, but what he needed was her to perform at a higher level to help him. And she had been very vocal in sharing with some of her coworkers and her boss, like, look, this is not my long-term play. I'm here for a short time. And what I helped her see was like, well, this boss of yours, yes, he's lashing out and he's really hoping that you can help him. It's not all your responsibility, but kind of put yourself in his shoes. This is his job. He's hearing it's not your job and it's not something long-term for you, but his is his job. He's got a family at home. Seems like as we started to break that down, his family life wasn't doing so well, and he was bringing all that toxicity in there. Now, I'm not sharing this because, oh, you should feel bad for him. You shouldn't be a jerk in the work environment, but if you can kind of get some perspective. And what we started framing was, okay, maybe start seeing it as like, he can't really help himself. Do I need to tolerate? Absolutely not. Do you need to go have a conversation with HR? Probably. But, really assess this. Are you making it more personal than it needs to be, or can you see it in a more positive light? And as we were leaving the conversation, she realized, like, you know what, I do know he wants to get more out of me. He's probably scared. I'm going to try thinking about it a little bit differently, and then take some action steps to try to make it a better place. So that whole idea of like being an anthropologist, like, why is that person acting that way? That coworker, that boss, like they said, what? Kind of taking that step back and not taking it personally, but like putting some distance in it and seeing it as either like, oh, that's just him being him, until you can get out of it. I'm not saying you should tolerate it. I'm not saying you should stay with it. But honestly, I've had work situations where I was like, I am never going to be able to work with this man. I am not enjoying this, or this woman. And as I got perspective and was able to take a step back and kind of go like, why are they doing that? I took it less personally. And even though they were still jerks, I just didn't care as much. And it wasn't, I didn't care, I'm not doing my job, which some people fall in the trap of. It was more like, I just don't care. I'm not going to put the energy behind it. They're not going to get that from me. I'm not giving my power away. And it helps you let go of your victim mentality. And honestly, staying in that can be, as I've shared, self-defeating and perpetuate the culture. So trying to take on that lens of like, I'm just in here to observe can really, really help. One thing that I also advocate, and this is the second step that ties a little bit to like taking that observational role, is trying to find one thing, just one thing you can like about the individuals, your boss, your coworkers who are making your job so difficult. I give this advice all the time. I work in a service industry, and I have a lot of big personalities that I work with and I have worked with. And it really helps if you can feel empathy. I kind of shared that already, that story, but like, can you find empathy with them? Can you find a way to connect? Also, like, in a way, it could throw them off their game. They're used to someone coming at them and being aggressive and raising and escalating that aggressiveness. But it just might be, a way of like just throwing them off and trying to see what fun you can have with it, like play with it, being nicer to them, trying different tactics. And really, it is just a job, and it's an experiment. This job, they're paying you to kind of figure out ways to go and rising above their toxic behavior and trying different things. Like today, I might say like, actually, that didn't feel good the way that you said it. That's perfectly legitimate. But in trying to empathize with them by like, hey, something going on, you seem a little bit off your game, could open up a whole conversation of, and maybe they just need an ear, like the home life's bad. They just got something that, like, as I just mentioned, this one boss had just received a bad review, and his store wasn't doing well. You never know where that can actually bring a bonding. I'm not saying that's going to change the person, but it can diffuse the situation. And sometimes one of the best things too is to touch that person if you're talking to them. I don't advise that always to try that, because you never know who you're dealing with. You can assess the situation, but some way to connect with them and have them realize that like you're a human being, they're a human being, and you see that. You look stressed, you know, and I'm feeling this. I'm feeling your stress. There's something that I can do to help. Might diffuse the situation, but trying to find one thing that can actually help you connect with them is a really great tool. If you can't connect with them, then the next one that I recommend is avoiding the assholes as much as possible, or spending as little time as possible with them. And because this is my own video and podcast, I can swear like that. But it can be one person that creates a toxic environment. It doesn't have to be your boss. Your boss might be the greatest thing ever, but it's like your coworker, the one that gossips. It just like spreads like a nasty bug. And one thing that they recommend, and actually Dr. Sutton from Stanford recommend that you bundle your interactions with them. So you could actually, instead of sending many emails, which they might react to, and there could just be a deluge of toxicity, you just bundle everything in one. It's very precise, it's very simple, exactly for what you want, and then you move on. You might want to set up a meeting. You could do that in person. You might just be a phone, depending on where you're located. But, you know, like one meeting instead of all these different individual interactions could really be helpful to control that situation. And it avoids also, if it really escalates to a point where like it really is becoming toxic, you're feeling attacked, you might also need to recommend that someone be on the phone. You don't have to do it as like, I feel like I'm being attacked, like let me invite someone on the phone. It could just be more, you know, I want to have this meeting, and inviting someone to participate in it. If it does become more toxic, that might be in more of an HR conversation. But having someone on the phone, and it avoids a he said, she said down the road, or she said, whatever iteration of it, to make sure that you're being heard and that you have some sort of buffer. So group meetings, maybe it doesn't have to be just one other person. It can just like, you know, we're going to get the group together, we're going to go through things. But the point is to really consolidate and avoid as many possibilities of having to be in the company of someone who is really making your life difficult. Another area is using your words, and they teach us that as little kids, and then somewhere along the way, especially with the women that I work with, sometimes we just like lose our ability to speak up. For most of the men, I know it's a little bit of stereotype, they don't seem to have that problem, but all of our voices are important. So if your supervisor is being vague, or you don't understand what they're asking, don't hesitate to ask questions. A lot of people avoid, regardless of gender, asking because they don't want to feel like, oh, don't want to be to come across that I wasn't listening, or I didn't hear, or I didn't get it. You always need to speak up. And some of the best ways that you can do that, and it's really great training, and I did this in my last call, so if you want to, you can go on YouTube and listen to that. It's like the #1 thing that can help your career, which is called active listening. You listen to what they're saying, you repeat their instructions, and you put it in writing afterwards. It's also good, by the way, for those of you that are in a service industry that need to speak with clients, you always repeat what they're saying, and you say, this is what I heard you say. Is this what you're saying? Great. You can also ask, because sometimes it's hard to take notes while you're repeating these things. I often do, I'll have my my recorder on my phone, and I'll turn it on and go, look, I want to record this so I can listen and participate and take notes. But regardless, you always have to, by the way, let people know that you're recording a conversation if you do that. But the point is, like, just make sure that you always are repeating, this is what I heard, and then writing up. You don't need to make a big deal of it. You're just trying to make sure, and this is how you position it. And it's always about positioning to get your way. I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly. I want to do the best job. And honestly, sometimes it's just the best way to make sure that you have a trail in case things do escalate in a toxic relationship and also toxic environment. So one of my coworkers actually did this brilliantly this week. We'd gone into a meeting. Someone we were working with just started like, it was this most nasty, like, really, you thought that was a smart idea? Mocking, which I drove me fucking crazy. I definitely make sure that like block certain people when I send this, but she's like, oh, so really, how would you address this? And it was so brilliantly, it threw the person off. And it got the person off the scent of a blood, because that tends to be like, oh, are they feeling like they found a weakness in? Because it's all ego based. And it gave also that person a sense of purpose. Oh, how would I solve that? And just diffused it. And we actually ended up in a really better place. So sometimes you can also bond with your coworkers and just go, look, we're walking in an environment. We know the boss, somebody is toxic. One of us is going to try to make sure we focus on diffusing it, that we all don't always get like triggered by it. And we ask that question, like, how would you tackle it? It makes them feel important. And honestly, that's usually when someone's being very toxic, they're scared, they're trying to feel important, they're a narcissist, all those different things. But if you can diffuse them, that would be great. Always know that if you do need to escalate, just to share on this, weigh the pros and cons of going to HR. This is where I was going to share my personal story of, at one role, I had this woman I worked for. Her name was Heidi. She called herself the Heidinator. That was a combination of her name and the Terminator. Literally, she really called herself that. She attacked me, other people, our clients. She would send our clients these awful emails in the middle of the night they'd wake up to. And she knew she was doing it. She called herself that. I was recently asked what was one of my regrets in my career. And what I realized in that moment is not sticking up to her was a regret. I was a mid-level manager. I had people below me. I did my best to protect them. But if I had tried more vociferously, and again, you have to assess this. HR was aware of the situation. And they didn't seem to be doing what they really trying to help. So I kind of let it go. But the point is that I ended up quitting. Two people below me ended up quitting at the same time. So she was in a really bad place. Not that she didn't deserve it, but also the agency that I was working at ended up losing the business. And I had said to them that. And what I found out later after talking to a couple coworkers is that there have been discussions about moving me on to another account, but this woman would change her mind saying that I wasn't doing well, but then I was doing well. We know how toxic bosses work. But if I had maybe followed through and had gone to talk to HR one more time and said, look, I really do need to leave. I've had a great reputation here. This is just not a good fit. And fit's really important. Remember, when you're assessing your role, you're looking at the challenge, the money security, and fit. I could have maybe found out that they had offered something, but she said no, and I could have pushed for myself. And maybe the account would have been there. I'm not regretting it, saying like, oh, I feel like I did a misstep. I just look back in hindsight, and now I take that forward with me, that I will be the one that will speak up. And if it's, and not even if it's just, I was going to say if it's safe, but just I can do it in a way that's constructive. I position it well, and I do it from this is the betterment of my team and the agency. I'm using my voice a lot more. So I share that with you. The next one to really be thinking about is take initiative to change. Okay, sometimes the toxic workplace is beyond hope. In which case, like in that previous one, yeah, I look back and in hindsight, I can take it forward. But honestly, it wasn't going to change. And you might just not want to bother. But what if you do feel you can make a change? What I did with my team while I was still there was I take them out. We do scavenger hunts. You bond. Maybe it's Bagel Friday. You try to fund the place up. You don't look for permission for it. As I mentioned, I focused on my team in some of those situations. That's usually what I try to protect, because at agencies, you've got the big agency and you've got your smaller team. And I really do focus on that because I take a lot of pride in my leadership style and my team. But the point is just do it. Perhaps it's worth instituting a monthly gathering. But little social interactions can go a long way, and it helps other people, especially, if it could be your boss or a coworker, to see other people as human beings and not just someone that I don't work with. And you get to know something personal. And that goes back to my previous one where I said you got to find something you like about people. One of the last and the seventh one of the 8 is take care of yourself. So I've given you a whole bunch of different things you can think about in a toxic environment, but you know, you got to take care of yourself regardless. The environment's probably not going to change. You probably know if you're really in a toxic one, you're trying to get your way out, but go for walks during the day. Get out of the toxicity. Go to the park. Take that lunch hour. Schedule a meeting on your calendar where you do absolutely nothing, where you call a friend for support, or you just do some meditation, where you do a little you do some push-ups on the floor. I don't know, whatever makes you feel better, but you take that break and you don't think about work. You might go back to your desk feeling a little bit more refreshed and motivated. You go take that lunch, but you take care of yourself, and you do so outside of work as well. Sometimes it's setting those boundaries. We've talked previously about making sure that you make sure that they know when you're available and when you're not available. And one way to take care of yourself, and this was a great tip given to me, always leave on the same time every day so that people get used to that's when they're leaving. 2, never come in at the same time during the week, during the morning. And the reason why is because people get to rely on you, and it's amazing. There's a lot of noise that goes in our head of I need to be there, I'm dependable. It's validating, and it could be, again, a work ethic thing that's an overactive work ethic. But if you come in different times during the morning, you might want to go work out one morning. You might want to go have a coffee with a colleague. Just getting them used to obviously come in by the time you're supposed to be in there. I don't want you coming in super late, but you don't have to be the first one in every time. I actively will come in around 8:30 some days, and sometimes I come in at 9:30. Most people are in my office by 10 o'clock. And I always mix it up so that no one's ever always relying that I'm going to be there, though I am reliable, I'm checking in. So that's one way of taking care of yourself as well. The last, I lost my numbering, but one of the last things is practicing an attitude of gratitude. This may sound like a little agey, but hear me out, and most of you I know have probably experienced this, but the science of gratitude has proven effects. So keep a journal of what you're feeling grateful for. It'll help you sleep better, it'll be more optimistic and resilient, and feel less stressed because of that toxic environment is really getting to you. Make sure that you are actually getting that time in to really be grateful for what's going on in your life out of work, but also, do it at work. When something becomes really stressful, take a moment, take that break. It goes back to taking care of yourself, and maybe start writing what are you grateful for? I'm grateful that this gives me a paycheck. Yes, sometimes that's all it has to be, but you start thinking about that. You're grateful for one of your coworkers that can make you smile. Just something that you're writing down that really gets about, and specifically, you can write down all the bad stuff that you think about the job, but try to find something grateful. When it gets really bad, this is a good way to take care of yourself and also practice gratitude. Send it to a friend. Say, I'm having a moment and I want to have a witness, and here's what I want to tell you that I'm grateful for. I have my clients, and it's always my homework. Whenever I find the thing that they need to work on, they need to text me and tell me in the moment that they need help with reframing something, or when they've decided that they actually reframed themselves and they've seen something as less negative and more positive. It might be, again, these things could be small things from the ergonomic desk that you have, and yes, sometimes that's reaching. But one of the things that I worked with one of my clients on that gave her such a smile was with the company that she was working with. She realized that one of the things that she thought was funny is that this big, huge business, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they were actually, all their business was on Google Drive. And she was grateful that in such a big behemoth, she could find humor, and that this big behemoth is actually on Google Drive. So whatever it is, write it down, keep it in front of you. You can do it at home if you don't feel like your information's safe to keep at work, but you can write it also at work. That could be part of how you take care of yourself, and take a moment or text someone in that. And lastly, number 8 is really along the whole thing of this is you should be looking for a new role. It's very rare that toxic environments turn around. It's why companies tend to go down. They have high turnover. Doesn't mean it won't happen. As I shared before, one of my clients, she outlasted it. But I'm always telling my clients, you should always be looking, whether you like your job or not. You should be dating around. It helps you practice. It helps you keep your story. And it enables you to share your accomplishments. There's nothing better than talking to someone and being this is what I accomplished, being able to say it, and remind yourself of what a badass you are, and they're going to tell you so. And if for some reason you like, it's great to practice, I call it playful practice, where you can just talk to these people, and it doesn't mean that like it means anything. Like, you're just getting the practice in. You don't have to worry about this being a role that you absolutely want, especially if you're in a place that you like, but it gets you next to the next role that you want. And it's good to practice, even if you're not sure you want that role, just to, you know, get that out of the way, get your story down, and then it'll help you when you actually want a role that you want. And always, when you're starting to look for that new role, it's a great time to be working with a coach, working with friends, working with me, helping you really get your positioning down, know your story, why you're leaving, your strengths and your weaknesses, all those different things. But regardless, I recommend, if you take anything away from this, to always be looking if it's a toxic or a good environment. So I think one question: what can I do to find an emotional support as my midlife career changer? I'm dealing with a toxic home life, lost my fiance, best friend in 2014, a turning point that shifted me away from the landscape trade and towards geographic information systems. I know I need practical experience in the form of an internship, paid or unpaid. All right, so this is actually a perfect segue into asking questions. And since I've got someone who's really eager, I'm going to work with their question first, and then take questions from anyone else who's on the phone. And I had questions sent to me separately. You know, where do I find emotional support as a midlife career change? So, I don't know if this person wants me to share their name, so I'm just going to call you Tara. Tara, you know, you're talking about here finding, and you can chat me if I ask questions, or you can take yourself off mute. It's fine either way, but it sounds like you've had a lot of loss. And the first question I would have for you in this midlife career changes, you know, do you have the support? Because you have a toxic home life, you lost your fiance, your best friend. It sounds like your mother is not, though she's trying in her warped way, be supportive, is kind of rubbing your age in your face. Do you have friends and support beyond your home life? And if I don't see you typing, so I'm going to keep going with this. And if you start typing in, my one answer would be, then you do need to find a posse, a group that you can really bond with. And it's not easy. Like, look, I'm Generation X. We're all in our, 40s, very early on in our 40s. But, okay. So yes, so that's where I was going to go with that. So yes, where can you find that posse? So one thing I highly recommend, there's actually a couple of women on this call that are part of it, is joining a support group. So it can be, there's a really great support group. She changed my life, Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts. It actually brought a whole bunch of women together. I made tremendous friends. They're still friends of mine to this day. I actually took it in 2013. I highly recommend it. If that's not something you're looking for, there are other different women that bring women together. There's Barbara Stanny. She does courses. Start looking into, like, there's Gabby Bernstein. I'm going to be doing courses in the fall, but I don't want to wait for you for that long. Anywhere that there's bringing women together in a strengthening position. So if you're looking to actually midlife change your career, you might be looking at, mentioned here, you might be looking for an internship. Do you want to be going into still a career or your own business? And I'll repeat those names in a second, Wendy. Just give me the question. All right, while you're typing, the names of those groups were my career first and later on my own. Okay, great. So I'll answer the first, like, that was Mama Gina's School of Womanly Arts. Still one of the best groups that I've ever been with. And I know there's some women on here that can tout to that, of bringing women together and women that support each other. The other ones, Barbara Stanny, you can look into, Gabby Bernstein. Start looking at some of even Tony Robbins. I know he's more male, and he's had a little bit of grief lately in the press because he didn't handle himself so well. But, anywhere they're bringing like-minded individuals. There's also a Landmark. One of my friends swears by Landmark, and she's met so many friends in that. Also think about, Tara, places where what you like to do. I had broken up with my boyfriend a little while back, and he got me into bike riding. I've met so many people through bike riding. I really enjoy it. It's a bonding thing. Do you like to knit? Do you like to bond? Find also, could just be one of those groups, or find something around like what you like to do to connect with people that have similar interests, because that'll help you feel supportive. And also, since you've been through loss, like you might want to look for a loss, like, there's groups that look at like Nicole Moore. She focuses on love. So does Lauren. And if you want to email me at info@loamlife.com, I can introduce you to a couple people, but they have these different groups and they bring women together. The important thing is that like there might be some loss that you need to deal with. And so a group that deals around loss could be another area. In regards to also, you mentioned career first and later your own enterprise. So, what kind of, these are some things I'd work on. And actually, if you also want to reach out at info, we'll get you a free half hour on my calendar. We can talk a little bit more deeply in this, but, an internship, what exactly are you looking for in that internship? You said paid or unpaid, because you're obviously looking for a way into this. The one thing I can just share with you on this phone, it's important for everyone here, male or female, I don't care how old you are. I have a million different examples of women and men who start later in their career and build their business and or get an internship or get their next level in their career. It happens all the time. You have to believe it. Yes, there is some ageism in certain parts of it, but one thing that's been happening is because, and I apologize to millennials because I know that you're not all like this, but the millennial workforce came in and they're not putting in the same kind of work ethic that like boomers and Gen X did. And there's now a huge movement. It wasn't just a movie. Like they're actually bringing more individuals who are older and have more experience back into internships and into roles because they're finding that work ethic is really strong. You got to be careful that you don't overextend your boundaries, but that's really important. And so I'm interested in consider the game. Yeah, I know a lot of us are Gen X and like thinking about different things. We're at that place in our lives where, it's like, I don't want to work 70-hour weeks. And I really want to enjoy my life. It seems to be a rite of passage. So that you need to get this internship. So really focus in on getting that internship. Who do you need to like meet to get it? You might already know this, but I'll just say a couple of quick things and I'll take some other questions. But like, who do you need to connect with? How do you get the internship? How do you help yourself stand out? These could be some of the things we could talk about in the free discovery call, Tara, if you want to set that up. But yes, like you seem to know that like you need this internship for where you want to go. So then like, I'm sure there's only a few slots. I don't know how many people you're competing with. This would be information to also get in on. And then how do we get you, and I mentioned this at the very beginning of the call, how do we get you your point of difference so you stand out and they're like, this is the intern. This is who we want to put behind. And so you get the experience, you get where you want to go and you take that next step. And that's amazing, by the way, like way to go and like taking that next step in your career. And don't let moms that are trying to like be helpful because they just say things. And I'll just share with you real quick. Like my mom said the other day, my ex is now in domestic partnership. And she's like, how do you find someone before you? I know that's not career-wise, but I'm like, how is that helpful? And she's like, well, I'm just coming from a place that loves you. And I know that they do. And your mom probably means the same thing. But like age is not, you only let it get in your way if you let it get in your way. And I can give you even more examples of people that didn't. So Tara, I'm going to take a step away from the chat box to see if there's anyone else. We can take people off mute to make it easy. But is there anyone else that has questions that would like to get some insight?
Victoria, this is June.
Hi, June.
Hey. I have a question about a toxic environment, dealing with an individual and probably a millennial. Um, like what I'm finding is that there's like this particular individual does the what I call it. She is very manipulative, and she goes around to each member of the team and like creates like this bond with them, and then they start doing what I call her bidding for her. So everybody is speaking for her,
Ah,
and she just kind of sits back and she stirs up a lot of stuff, or at least that's my perception.
uh-huh.
And then she sits back and kind of watches. And I've never been in an environment where an individual is crying in meetings and like leaving the meetings. And
Wait,
that's,
she's doing that?
yeah, she does that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, it's her signature is that she starts to cry and then she leaves the meeting because she just can't take anymore or whatever.
Wow.
And I mean, I, I, I guess that I don't know what I am. What am I? I was born in '64, whatever that makes me.
Thank
Um,
you.
and I have a strong work ethic. I'm not emotional. I'm very logical
Uh-huh.
and very supportive and very loving. And so I'm not really sure because I'm an only child. I've never really been involved with, like, how siblings, they can gang up on each other, and that's what
Yeah.
it feels like in our office.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you're definitely part of Gen X, and that, and yeah, millennials are definitely bringing a different. Guy I was working with was saying like, there's this millennial, she's going around and like stirring up some trouble. It's interesting though because like that seems like a very manipulative tactic to be like crying like So let me ask a couple questions. One, has anyone like above you seen this and are they concerned?
No, my boss is an amazing man,
Uh,
absolutely amazing man. I love him,
okay.
but
All
he's
right.
clueless. He's not one to deal with conflict or deal with things, and he just is absolutely clueless. And she has this particular individual has she's got a way, what I would call a way with like mesmerizing men. I've never seen anybody that's as effective at it as
Okay.
she is, and we have like a lot of men managers.
Okay.
So
All right. So let's think about this for a second, because that's an interesting one. Because usually, like toxic people are helping, getting people to cry. So she's manipulative. She's crying in meetings, and she's galvanizing people. Is she galvanized? Is it impacting you in a way of like? Is it just annoying, or is it actually impacting your work and your ability to like succeed in this environment?
I am succeeding
Okay.
because I don't let things get me down. But I
Uh,
mean, it's one of those where you say like withdrawal. Basically, what I've done
yeah.
is I try to stay away as much as I can, and I've been working from home,
Okay.
um, like maximizing that situation because it seems like every time I go into the office, like there's some kind of an ambush, is what it feels like,
Okay.
where they're like crying, and she's got one that's older too, like they're crying about things that they're not really important.
Okay. So when your frustration of this beyond like it just sounds really annoying, what are you looking for a strategy of like how to stop this? Or I guess like what when you if you could leave from this conversation, you're like, I would really like um to be able to deal with this, not let it bother me or change it.
I would like to navigate,
Navigate it.
like navigate it, and like I'm still positive and I'm still me and I'm still encouraging and all of that. And like I've just I've never experienced anything like that before. Like, how would you neutralize that?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different tactics that are kind of popping into my head. One last question. Does she report into you, or how is she related to you in the work environment?
No, she doesn't report to me. No.
Okay.
She's currently my equal. I used to be a
Equal. Okay.
supervisor there.
Okay. All right. So yeah. Well, one, it just sounds disruptive. It sounds unprofessional. And as I'm getting in the chat, it sounds like very passive aggressive behavior. I absolutely agree, Tara. So what couple things that you could try. One is like you're trying to extricate yourself from it, but like that's not always going to be possible. Have you ever in a meeting just said like, hey, you're crying, is something wrong? Can we talk about this? Because it actually doesn't feel like now's the right time for this. I'm not saying exactly the way I want, but has anyone ever just addressed in the meeting and called the elephant out in the room?
Um, I've said stuff, but not like that. Like basically what happens is she starts this crying thing and then she leaves the room. So and I've been like surprised by it because I've never
Yeah.
experienced anything like it, you know.
So I guess a couple things that you could start looking at, like one, and I know you're going to already tell me that there's not a theme, but because it sounds like she just cries at the drop of the hat, but are there certain things that, like certain topics that make her cry? Just be interesting, like, putting that anthropology hat on of like, okay, so is it something certain is also like, if she's crying and this other person, like she said, other people are crying, is there something that actually beyond it just being unprofessional, is there something that actually is wrong and needs to be addressed?
I mean, I'll give you the example
Yeah,
of the crying. I came in one day and we have a young lady in our office that was getting married, and this lady she's absolutely amazing. And so we had like a birthday luncheon for these two individuals, I don't know, maybe a week or so before, or
Uh-huh.
3 weeks before maybe. And so we all had that luncheon, and the lady that was getting married was talking about her, that was her life. She was talking about all the different things that she was preparing for or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked about like giving this lady a bridal shower, and um, so they said, or I think I might have asked her, and they said, well, why would we give her a bridal shower? Because she took the limelight from their birthday lunch, and she talked all about that. I said, well, okay. And I said, this particular lady has supported each of you at different times. One of them was out for 3 months
Oh,
and
wow.
on
Yeah.
maternity leave.
Oh, okay.
And this particular lady that was getting married gave her like this beautiful shower and beautiful decorations and everything like that, and made sure that everything was right. And I said to them, she's supported each of you, at your time, like your special times or whatever. And then so they planned a bridal shower at the last minute.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't going to be there. It was one of the days that I wasn't scheduled to be in the office. And then they both like they were like, you have to be here, right? You have to be here. Like, and I said, she understands that I support her and I've always supported her.
Mm-hmm.
And she's not gonna be devastated if I'm not here for her bridal shower. And, I was like, and if you're making it about me, it really should just be about her. Like, you want to support
Sure.
her in her life journey.
Yeah.
And I wasn't emotional or anything like that. And then when our supervisor came in, when he walks in, they both like run out of they leave crying that I'm not going to be there. And I was like, wow, okay.
I'm sorry. There's
It's
really.
it's funny. That's what I'm saying. It is so. I've never experienced it
Yeah.
before.
Is it
And
only
I mean,
happening with like actions you're taking, or is it with anybody? Because I'm
well,
starting to get worried that like this is like.
Well, it's not just me. Like
Okay.
this
All right.
particular individual is attacking. Like one of the gentlemen in the office is having some kind of something go on. He just lost his father,
Oh,
and so he's been out a lot on medical leave. And it's funny that he supported the one that is stirring up the trouble in there. He did her job for 3 months while she was out on maternity leave,
right.
and he never complained about it one time. And she is now being asked to be his backup, and she does nothing but complain and try to get people to attack him. So now they're in the process of trying to fire him. My supervisor is in the
Oh,
process of
wow.
to fire him and stuff. And it's, it's an interesting situation.
Okay. All
And
right.
then,
Okay.
yeah, so
No,
the lady that was getting married, she's under attack too. They keep trying different things to get everybody in trouble. And I've never experienced it before.
yeah. So that's what I was kind of a little bit worried about was, one, are they isolating certain people? Like you're kind of feeling it, like, which is just ridiculous. Like that you're not fine. You could be like, in that instance, like, look, yes, it's not about me. This is about this person. And actually I'm going to give them a separate card just to show how much I care about them, easily diffuse that. But like that they've gone after this one guy, he's actually now losing his job.
Hmm.
It sounds like this woman is extremely toxic and also extremely dangerous. So
Yeah.
there is some things. One, I would try, which you're doing, to avoid trying to avoid being with that person at all. If she's getting other people along, I was going to say, like, always be with people in meetings. Unfortunately, if she's been able to get this guy out, then like, I'm not sure how people view her. In regards to like, does she do a good job? Is she well regarded? I guess she does hold a lot of sway.
Yeah,
So,
I
yeah,
mean, she's very, very, very talented. I love that about her. She has skills that are phenomenal. And at the same time, she's lazy. She doesn't like to do a lot of stuff, but she picks and chooses the one that is like a high profile for like the director or
yeah,
whatever. And she can mesmerize a man like I've never seen in my life.
yeah. My gut would
So,
be, June, honestly, without more detail, would be like avoid her as much as possible. Like if she cannot impact your job, she can't take your job or any of those kind of things. Because obviously she is very much like vindictive, and also, from what you shared, like got this guy out. She's obviously very manipulative, that like, the less that you cross paths with her, the better. Because she seems to have the upper hand, it
mhm.
doesn't sound like it would benefit you at all to try to like confront. But like what you can do, which would be a really smart move, in any kind of interaction with her, is just, as awful as it's going to feel and sound, like, just make her right. Oh yeah, you know what, like, I'm not going to be able to be there, but I can totally see your point, and I'm going to do something extra special. Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. Like, just really try, like, the training, like the man training, like, acknowledge her, give her something else to solve, and then like try, just make her right. You
Okay.
don't need to cross hairs with her, unless you can find something where you feel like there might be someone who understands. But if she has that much control, I would just make her right, avoid as much as possible, and just kind of suck it up, unless you and start looking to see if you would like to leave. But I know you've been there a while. You've shared previously before, and she just sounds like she's dangerous and she needs to be avoided.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, Anyone else on the call that has any more questions? And June, one last thing, I would definitely be documenting some of this stuff. You
Yeah.
never know where you might need it, your observations. Tides can always turn, and at one point she might just pick the wrong person, and or an opening might open. Like, you never know that case. So I document stuff, but just be on the be on your guard, which I know you will be, because she just sounds like she, from all what you said, like she's just a dangerous person. And unfortunately, she's in your environment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And anyone, and actually someone just in the chat room said, definitely make sure to keep a time and dated log. So yeah, I'm sorry about, yeah, I'm sorry that that's the case, but yeah, I would be documenting things and be aware of it, because she just sounds, from how you described, as dangerous. Anyone else got any questions, thoughts that they'd like to discuss?
I have a question.
Sure.
How do you manage to, I've left a toxic work environment because it was just horrendous.
Okay.
How do you, when you're applying for jobs, how do you try to avoid going into a toxic work environment?
So that's actually a great question. When you're going into your next role, what you need to be assessing your role is on 3 different areas. One is on the challenge, and that's where a lot of people focus, like, is this the right challenge? Do I feel invigorated by it? Looking at money and security, and these 3 entities, money and security is one, like what kind of like security can I get? Does it have money? At the top, also thinking about like what the challenges, do I like it? Will I find it invigorating? And then what the fit is. And actually, you didn't mention your name, but there is a set of 10 questions that I'm actually going to be sending out, which I can make sure to get to you, where you ask specific questions to assess this fit. Some of the questions can be, just off the top of my head, like, who is successful here? And I'm going to get to like your question, like how you position it. But like when you're assessing it, like, who's successful here? Who's not successful here? That is always ripe. And ask that question to every single person you talk to. This throws everybody off, and this is my favorite question ever. If you were to take this, you were offered this job, would you take it? It always throws everybody off. And the moment that if they're like, yes, I absolutely would, you'll genuinely see that. And if they're like, oh, it's like the best question ever, because they're never expecting it. And then for them to try to support why they would take it, a lot of stuff comes out. And that's a question you should ask everybody else as well. Because you want to hear the over-enthusiasm, and you want to make sure that nothing's coming out. You also want to make sure that you are talking to people who have worked there before, and if you can, who work there now. Now that, like June shared, this one woman at her current company, if someone was to reach out to June, June could have a private conversation, or and could share like, hey, this is the only detriment here. You kind of create that environment where you ask someone previously, like, why, find out people that work there. Why did you leave? They'll always be honest. Sometimes people that work there may not be as honest, but they will try to share, because people tend to try to help. And then if you want to talk about like why you've left a place, you always leave it very positively. Don't get into the toxicity of it. But you're just looking for your next challenge, and either something came up that moved you out of that, and there's different ways to position it, but always make it a very positive thing and a choiceful thing to the next company that you're going to be working with. Did that answer your question? You have any other follow-up?
Oh, very much so. No, those are good topics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's going to be a good, that's going to be a next blog post. So thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions that anyone has? Okay. Well, then I would just like to thank you all for joining, and those that are listening in. This will be sent to you so you can listen to it again. For those that ask questions, they want to hear the responses. You can feel free, again, as I said, to follow up with me at info@loamlife.com. You can get a free half-hour coaching session. I'd love to talk to you and see if potentially we can work together. If you found this conversation helpful, please do forward on. You're on my mailing list. Obviously, make sure you're forwarding this on to your friends. And a couple of things that are coming up. I'm going to be on a couple different podcasts. I am on Instagram. I am on LinkedIn. And you feel free to link in with me. Honestly, if any of you are interviewing and you see that I'm connected with someone, I have no problems talking to you and introducing you to people. But link in with me, Facebook with me. I've got blog posts coming out, more content coming out. I'm going to be launching some new programs. And my next call will be June 17th. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Tara, for that in the chat. And I just hope you all have a great night and a great kickoff to your work week. And if it's toxic, remember, it's not you. Try to get some distance with it. And I thank you for all for joining my call.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.